So today we are going to be talking about the Olympian gods. So the number 12 comes from the Greek liking multiples of 3 in their mythology, but who the 12 Olympians are specifically varies. Sometimes some gods are included, sometimes they aren't, and sometimes when you add them all up, it gets to a number larger than 12. We're not going to worry about it. So the main 12 of the 12 are the children of Kronos and Rhea. So we have Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Hades, and Hestia. So you notice that Hades and Hestia both have an asterisk. They don't always count as Olympians. Hades because he's down in the underworld and not on Mount Olympus, and Hestia because she's sitting at the hearth and not in the 12 thrones. The other half are made up of the other half is made up of the children of Zeus. So we have Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Hephaestus, Hermes, Dionysus, Aphrodite, and Homer lists her as being the daughter of Zeus. In Hesiod, she is the daughter of Kronos as his testicles fall into the ocean, but in the Iliad, Homer lists her as being the daughter of Zeus and Dione, and if you know the root of Zeus, that means she's the daughter of Zeus and Zeusette, so it's kind of funny. Persephone also sometimes counts. So here we have Jupiter. Jupiter, or Zeus, is his name is Zeus, and Jupiter is a corruption of Zeus Pater, Father Zeus. And sometimes in Latin he's called Jovis or Jove. He is the sky god, king of the gods, because he overthrew his father, but his main power is that he is the god of the sky, god of thunder, god of weather over the land. Epithets, which is what often will be attached to his name, like a nickname in poetry, he is called the cloud gatherer. Cloud gatherer Zeus arrives. He's called eagle-eyed. And he's called father of gods and men, because quite literally he is the father of the gods and quite a few men. His symbols are the oak tree, the eagle, and the thunderbolt, and he has way too many kids to count because he is literally the father of gods and men. Next we have Hera. Hera is, her Roman equivalent is Juno, or Juno in Latin pronunciation. She is queen of the gods, as Zeus's consort, and she is the goddess of marriage and the goddess of women. Her epithets are cow-eyed. That's if you look at an actual cow, they have very beautiful eyes, so this isn't an insult. She's called Argive, which relates to a town called Argos, which is sacred to her. And she's called child, widow, or wife, depending on how she's feeling. So before they were married, Zeus called her child. While they're married, he calls her wife. And then whenever she's had enough of him and leaves Mount Olympus in a huff, he calls her widow. Her symbols are the peacock and the cow. And her children are Ares, Hephaestus, Eileithyia, Hebe, Enyo, and Eris. Enyo and Eris are sometimes not her children, and Hephaestus is sometimes said to only be her child, that she's so mad at Zeus for having Athena on his own that she had Hephaestus on her own. Next we have Poseidon. His Roman equivalent is Neptune. He is the god of the sea, horses, earthquakes, and sea storms. His wife is Amphitrite, and she's not as jealous as Hera is. His epithets include Earthshaker, because when he hits the ground with the trident, he causes earthquakes. He's called Tamer of Horses, because he is the creator of horses. And his symbols are the trident and horses, obviously. And he has many children, but some main ones are Triton, who is kind of half fish. You might remember him from The Little Mermaid. Pegasus, who is the child of him and Medusa. And then Theseus, who is sometimes Poseidon's child, sometimes the child of Aegeus. Then we have Demeter. Her Roman equivalent is Ceres, or Ceres, as you would say in Latin. She's the goddess of harvest, of grain, of fertility, like plant fertility. Her epithets are the lawgiver, the implacable, because she is not always a nice person, and she is broad-faced. Once again, this has to do with her beauty. It's not an insult. Her symbols are the cornucopia, which is a woven horn filled with fruits and vegetables. Her symbol is wheat, a loaf of bread, or a torch. That has to do with her worship in the Eleusinian mysteries. It's a large mystery cult near Athens. Her child is Persephone. It's her child with Zeus. Hades, his Roman equivalent is Dis or Orcus. You notice I didn't say Pluto, so we'll get to that in a moment. He is the lord of the underworld, and his epithets include Pluton or Pluto, which means the rich man. When you say a god's name, you call them to your presence, and if you call the lord of the dead to your presence, that's not a good thing. So they would use a euphemism for him. So they would call him the rich man because everything under the earth, including metals and precious stones, belongs to him, so he's rich. And sometimes the Romans would also call him Pluto. So it's not there are many names for him. He's called the unseen one and the giver of wealth, once again, because all that is under the surface of the earth belongs to him. His symbols are Cerberus, as you can see there. It's the three-headed dog, the cypress tree, the narcissus flower, which you might know as the daffodil, and his scepter. And his wife is Persephone, who is also his niece. Yeah, it's weird. Hestia, she is the Roman, or her Roman equivalent is Vesta. And the Vestal virgins were incredibly important to the Romans. They were in service for 30 years, starting around age 10, and they had to stay virgins or they were buried alive. And they kept watch on the eternal flame. And the goddess, she's the goddess of the hearth and the home. The hearth is the fireplace. And she doesn't have any children. She is a virgin goddess, and she gives up her throne for Dionysus, so she sits at the hearth. But her symbols are the hearth and the fireplace, and the fire that is in the fireplace itself. So we have Athena. Athena, her mother Metis was prophesied to have a son who would overthrow his father. So when she became pregnant, Zeus got worried because he is, in fact, the one who fathered the child. So he plays this game where they're switching into different animals. And when he tricks her into becoming a fly, he swallows her because he doesn't want to lose her because her name means thought. And so he wants to keep her wisdom. And so months and months later, he has this horrible headache. They split open his head, and Athena comes out fully formed. And her Roman equivalent is Minerva. She is the goddess of wisdom and strategic war, and then arts and crafts. Her epithets are gray-eyed, or sometimes called owl-eyed, and aegis-bearing. This is the like a shield, or sometimes called a breastplate. And she's called Maiden, which is Parthenos. You might remember the Parthenon that is in Athens. And her symbols are the owl, the olive tree, her armor, and the head of Medusa, which she puts on her aegis. Next we have Apollo. He was point blank stolen by the Romans. I'll give you that. Okay, so his Roman equivalent is Apollo. He is the god of medicine, the arts, and archery. When he shoots his arrow, it brings disease. He is later merged with the god Helios and becomes god of the sun, but that's later on. His epithets include Delphic, Delian, or Pythian, which all have to do with areas where he was worshipped. And he's called Bright, or Phoebus Apollo. And his symbols are the lyre, the laurel wreath, the python, the raven, and the bow and arrow. And his children, he has a lot of them, but one kind of important one is Asclepius, who is a god of healing. Artemis is Apollo's twin sister. Her Roman equivalent is Diana. She's the goddess of the hunt, archery, and childbirth, and her arrows bring this silent, painless death. And later she is merged with the goddess Selene and becomes goddess of the moon. Her epithets include Potnia Theron, which means mistress of animals, Bright, or Phoebe, to coincide with Phoebus Apollo, and Cynthia, meaning from Mount Cynthus, which is an area where she was worshipped. And her symbols are the bow and arrow, the stag, which is a type of deer, and the hunting dog. Ares, his Roman, I'm going to put this in quotation marks, equivalent is Mars. Mars is originally a farming god. He was called Mawars. And when the Romans moved from like being, mercenaries, farmers during the like the fall and winter, and then warriors during the summer, they just brought him along with them, and he becomes this god of war. So he's actually more similar to Athena in many ways. Mars is very different, very much similar to Minerva or Athena, and so Ares himself is the god of this violent, untamed war, blood and guts. I don't care who dies as long as everyone dies. His epithets include curse of men, sacker of cities, of the shining helmet. So you can see they don't really like him. If you find a temple in Greece to Ares, it's probably one built by the Romans for Mars. So his symbols are the dogs, vultures, boar, flaming torch, or a chariot. His children, he has Phobos, fear, Deimos, dread, Harmonia, and Eros, as in like the Cupid Eros. Then we have Hephaestus. His Roman equivalent is Vulcan. He is the god of the forge, the fire, and blacksmiths, and he is said to be deformed because Zeus threw him off Mount Olympus when he got between Hera and Zeus when they were fighting. Another says that he was born deformed because Hera tried to give birth to him on her own in retaliation for Zeus having Athena on his own, and so because Zeus wasn't involved, he was ugly. So there are many reasons, but the reality is he's crippled because actual blacksmiths were crippled because they used arsenic in the blacksmithing process, which caused nerve damage and left them like hideous to look at. So of course their patron god is going to look like them. So we don't know. Epithets, he's called of the strong arms, he's called lame as in crippled, and he's called the craftsman. His symbols include the hammer, the anvil, and the quail. So next we have Hermes. Hermes is the god of travel. His Roman equivalent is Mercury, so he's god of messengers, travel, thieves, and trickery. He's very similar to like Coyote or to Loki in some ways. He's a trickster. He's a psychopomp, which means he leads the souls of the dead to the underworld, so he's like the Grim Reaper. And his epithets include giant killer because he kills the giant Argos, and he's called keen-eyed. His symbols are the winged sandal, the caduceus, which has 2 snakes. The rod of Asclepius only has 1, and that's what you have for medical terminology. And he's also the rooster and the tortoise. His children include Pan, who's that half goat god. Then we have Dionysus. Dionysus her Roman equivalent is Bacchus or Liber. Liber means freedom. He's the god of wine and theater, and he's the only god to have a mortal mother. Zeus fathers Dionysus with Semele, and Hera tricks her into asking Zeus to prove that he is Zeus, and so he does this by using a lightning bolt and then burns Semele to a crisp, and then he takes the baby from her womb and sews it into his thigh, and then Dionysus was technically born of a god, born of Zeus, therefore he is a god. His epithets include the liberator and wild. He is not a nice guy, okay, just so you know. He's also called goat killer because it has to do with his cult beliefs. And his symbols are the thyrsus, which is a staff with a pine cone on top, the grapevine, and the leopard. And his companions are Silenus the satyr and the Menids, which are his women who follow him around. Then we have Aphrodite. Aphrodite is the daughter of Zeus and Dione in the Iliad, but also she could be the daughter of Kronos. Her Roman equivalent is Venus. Julius Caesar claims to descend from Venus through her son Aeneas. Aeneas appears in the Iliad, and this is basically Julius claiming to descend from a god. She is the goddess of love, desire, and beauty. Her epithets include laughter-loving and Cyprian and Cytherean. Those are, once again, places where she's worshipped. And Her symbols are the dove, the swan, the dolphin, and the myrtle tree. And her children, she has so many children, but Eros, Cupid, which you might know, and Aeneas are the ones that are probably the most commonly mentioned.